Are recording.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Rishi,
I'm Christian Hunter.
and we'll be doing our film review on 7 Years in Tibet. So we'll be starting off with our overview. So a quick overview: the director is Jean-Jacques Annaud, and then there's five main characters. We picked Heinrich, the Dalai Lama, Peter, Pema, and Nyang Wang. And the key star of this film is Brad Pitt. And the setting is Tibet, specifically the capital city of Lhasa. And the also in the beginning of the movie, the setting is in Germany, and it's the timelines around World War II. So
Okay.
on to our analysis. Starting off with the theme and plot, I wanted to focus on two different scenes. So the first one is the progression of Heinrich's adoption of Buddhist culture. So comparing the first kind of interaction he had with the Dalai Lama to at the end when he's in the temple with everybody. So in the beginning, at the first scene, Heinrich was taught a list of rules and how he should act in the presence of the Lama, and struggled to follow them and would kind of just follow whatever the mother of the Dalai Lama was doing. Um, but by the end of it, he was dressed in Tibetan clothing, Buddhist clothing. He's bowing with everybody. He's not looking at what to do. He knows what he has to do before he acts, which kind of shows his adoption and care for the religion. And then the other event I wanted to focus on was when Heinrich finally reaches the summit. So in the beginning, his whole goal was to plant a German and Austrian flag at the top. And at the end, when he finally reaches the top of Nanga Parbat, he plants a Tibetan flag, which shows his embracement of Buddhism and the Tibetan culture after everything he's learned from all the people he's met. And this is kind of him giving back to something that's important to him. Yeah, so the first character I wanted to kind of dive deeper into is the Dalai Lama. I personally think it's kind of hard to hate him because he's such a young, curious, and mature kid for his age, as shown in the movie. And he not only learns a lot from Heinrich, but also teaches Heinrich a lot. And so kind of I wanted to start off with the first interaction that Heinrich has with the Dalai Lama. He thought it was going to be very formal, but instead the Dalai Lama reaches over and says, yellow hair, and then grabs his hair. And then he follows up with a bunch of questions like, do you like movies? But I also think in turn the Dalai Lama also teaches Heinrich a lot of things. For example, when Heinrich runs into a problem with the workers, kind of causing some commotion about the worms in the soil, the Dalai Lama explains that he kind of explains the concept of the cycle of rebirth, about how Tibetans think all worms were their mother in a past life, so they have to respect the worms and repay their kindness and never harm anything that lives. So I thought this was a kind of cool way that they both are able to learn from each other. And although the Dalai Lama is so young, he's able to give so much wisdom to him. And the second character I wanted to go over is Heinrich. So I think in the beginning, he was kind of closed minded. He was very goal oriented, which came in the way of his family relationships. But I think by the end of it, he was a whole different person. He learned the value of collaborating and learning from his surroundings. And I think a key thing I wanted to highlight was when he was in the prison grounds, he was so against working with other people to get out, and just in general working with people to climb the mountain in the Himalayas. But when he ended up teaming with Peter and the rest of his team and getting out, he ended up leaving them, but he would have never gotten out without Peter and the rest of his team. And he ends up sick and alone in the middle of the mountains. And guess who helps him? Peter. So I think through these lessons, Heinrich realizes the value of collaboration and working with the people around you. And I also think from learning with the Dalai Lama and getting ingrained into the Lhasa village, I think he carries a good heart and he's interested in learning from others once he is kind of thrown into that culture and kind of alone and away from home, and he kind of just has to rely on his surroundings, which I think makes him a bit more likable. And then going on to the film features, I think the general depiction of Lhasa is very interesting through this film. I think it shows the fair distribution of wealth through all through the village housing, the uniformity, and how everybody acts in the community. I also think I learned more about like how clothing and how different robes mean different parts of the Buddhist hierarchy. I also think Jean Jacques Anand did a great job in terms of showing customs and traditional temples in terms of greeting music, festivals, kind of general order in the temple. Where do people sit? What are some common colors? What are some things that they discuss? I think the film not only showed in terms of Buddhism in general, I think it really did a great job because it traveled from Germany, it traveled from the Himalayas to China to India. I think it shows how interconnected all these places is, which kind of explains the progression of how Buddhism spread throughout the world.
Awesome. We're moving on to reflection now, starting with the relevance pieces. So the first quote I took from the Orientist commercializations was Tibetans are depicted as innocent primitives without social graces, education, or guile. They stick out their tongues outside the hair. As children on the playground might taunt a new classmate. The audience laughs at their lack of technology, automobiles, and especially movie theaters. So, um, obviously, one of the issues this movie has, it almost depicts Tibetans as a childish people without a sense of maturity or reality, when this could not be further from the truth, as Tibetan culture has been around for a long time, and simply because they do not have certain technologies or they have different beliefs as the Western world does not make them a primitive or childish culture. We see this a lot with Heinrich's character. In the beginning, he's often acting as superior, or he's like a father figure to like the people around him, and he thinks he's just better. But as you see his characters progress, he realizes that they are indeed a real culture, not just some primitive people that need to be led. The second issue that I found, or the second quote I have, is he even depicts the rats in Polita as cute, even though the Dalai Lama remembered them as frightening in his autobiography, which the original Kundun script was based. So this is talking about the second movie we had watched this week, Kundun. Um, but it's still a relevant issue in regards to the fact that American cinema often changes certain details of the character or story to get their idea of like a perfect character or a better storyline. In 7 Years Tibet, we only see one scene in which the monastery was destroyed, when in reality it was thousands of monasteries and thousands of monks being slaughtered. The issue being that Hollywood often disconnects the reality from the story in order to make the film more digestible for the audiences. Going to number three, Tibet may lose its place between our imposed fantasy of a lost utopia and the spotlight, of Hollywood. The public American marketers rely upon how now may move on to what the public sees as the next fad. So, by glorifying the fantasy of Tibet and Hollywood, the support for Tibet and Tibetans it booms and then rather quickly dies down, similar to a fad or a trend. This is due to the fact that when people realize that not everything is perfect in Tibet, especially after Chinese occupation, they lose interest in the subject matter, leaving Tibetans stranded and unable to receive the support they needed to be an independent country instead of an autonomous region of China. So we saw this issue throughout the movie. The secretary ended up betraying his own country and just believing that it was better to be occupied. And similar to that, the support for Tibetans just rapidly declined. Number four, to avoid the darker realities of our national culture, we seek those things which would allow us not only to escape those realities, but surmount them as well. This connects to the film, as Heinrich used to be a member of the Nazi Party, and over his years in Tibet, he realized how cruel and hurtful his national culture was. He ultimately escaped his previous culture and replaced it with a culture he found in Tibet and the principles of Buddhism. On the last piece, this is from Togen's letter to Tricycle, the Buddhist Review. So it was a letter within the Orientalist commercialization piece we had to read. It said, "This is a far cry from Buddha's advice to discriminating wisdom as our guiding light. As demonstrated by history, consequences of such blind faith are disastrous, especially when placed upon someone who's a political leader." Now, as we can tell, this is really relevant to this story, as it's around the time when the Nazi Party is at its peak. It also goes through the World War. So this is one of also Buddha's original teachings, which is not to just blindly accept what is taught, but to question and compare it to your own life experiences. Returning to Heinrich's character, he originally never cared too much about the Nazi Party. Rather, he cared more about his ego, but he still went along with their policies as it suited him the best. And it wasn't until he was outside of Austria that he began to question the Nazi Party, but also other like lessons in life he learned about his ego, about caring about others, and how to deal with adversity, I guess, in the face of just not being able to connect with others or not finding love life. So I feel like once he got outside of the I guess the teachings of the Nazi Party, he realized it's not just about himself. Moving on to the comparison, I thought this is really similar to Samasura, because each main character starts off by abandoning or running away from their responsibilities. For Heinrich, it was his wife and his soon-to-be son. For Tashi, it was leaving behind the temple and his life as a monk. Both protagonists undergo great hardships and character development caused by their newfound environments. So for Tashi, it was becoming a farmer and actually having a new family and a new life, and experiencing greed and um, other just types of negative emotions that he's experienced for the first time. And then obviously for Heinrich, it was, holy shit, I'm lost in a mountain and now I'm in Tibet. This, however, is where the movies differentiate as Heinrich gains a better sense of clarity and compassion in his life and becomes a better man and eventually a better father to his son that he finally meets. On the other hand, Tashi becomes confused and misguided, leading him to fall back on his life as a monk, only to be crushed by the guilt of leaving his new wife and family behind. So I drew these two comparisons. Lastly, this is moving on to our understanding. This film reinforces our understanding of Buddhism as we see how compassion or karuna can change people for the better. For example, Heinrich was an arrogant, cocky, lonely, and rather annoying in the beginning of the film. No one liked him in his climbing group. They all just didn't really care, and he's very selfish. However, as he received the kindness and compassion of others, he slowly progressed into a better man, capable of reciprocating these feelings with others and loved ones. Furthermore, we see other virtues of Buddhism, like wisdom and kindness, being portrayed by Heinrich and others throughout the film. Heinrich teaches the Dalai Lama about the outside world and uses his knowledge to create a working movie theater in Lhasa. This ultimately brings happiness to those around him, elevating the community in which he is bonded with. By showing these virtues, by showing the effects these virtues have on the lives of oneself and others, we see positive benefits and the community bonding that Buddhism offers, reinforcing our overall understanding of Buddhism and its core beliefs. Lastly, I'd give this movie a 5 out of 5 stars. I believed it was great. I actually liked the pace of the movie. It wasn't slow or just like very drawn out as others, and an important plot. And I believe the resolution was pretty good. And even with my friends' taste in movies, I would still recommend it to them. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.